Hello there, BookTube. Wherever you are, I hope you're having a good day. Hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to be doing a bit of a wrap-up video for November before looking forward into December and putting together a little MBR, a little maybe read list for books I might read that month. There's some books I think I will read, and some others on the edges that I'm not going to be too strict with. So let's get straight into November and what I read then. I think the first book I finished in November was this little anthology of surrealist poetry in English, and this was really a fascinating book on the whole. So this isn't necessarily a foundational text on surrealism or on surrealist poetry. I think that would have a bit more of a French focus if it was doing that. Instead it's looking at surrealism and surrealist poetry in English, so I think it's mostly Americans and English or British poets, yeah, on the whole it's really good. There's also some translations actually, so some of those British and American poets translated sort of from French and Spanish and stuff, so there is a bit more of a at least European and South American sort of thing going on there as well, but on the whole it's mainly British and American. And definitely the first half of this was really fun. I think the thing I really love about surrealism is that, at least traditionally in surrealism, it kind of paints one picture and then it paints another picture and another picture, and these images kind of stack up, and each one isn't necessarily a logical step from the last one, and I kind of enjoy that because it's not necessarily there to confuse you, it's just not what you would expect, if that makes any sense. But then after about, in like the post-World War II years, it seems like lots of the poets in the anthology were trying to confuse you, particularly in their choice of language, and yeah, the poems just weren't as enjoyable for me after that point. They just seemed a bit too self-aware, a little too clever, or a little too like the poet's trying to be clever, and so still some great stuff in here, and I still think of this book very positively, but it was not quite as fun in the second half. And another book that wasn't quite as fun as I was hoping it would be is The Edge of the World by Michael Pye. So it's called, the little subtitle is How the North Sea Made Us Who We Are. And it's really looking at countries around the North Sea, so particularly the Low Countries, Britain, Scandinavia, and sort of Germanic countries and stuff like that, and looking at the kind of the relationships between these countries, maybe certain elements of their history that we don't always think of, and yeah, kind of making a case that the modern world was kind of almost built by this. I think when we think of civilization, we often go more to sort of southern Europe and think more of the Romans and of sort of other, and then what kind of came after the Romans. And so this making a case for the people up in the north, and it was interesting. It was good. I feel like his main point was made in the first chapter, and it didn't move on a lot from there, even though there's lots of interesting stuff after that. Because really his main point is that really many of these northern countries, through their trading and stuff, kind of put together capitalism more or less as we know it today. And that was his main point. He establishes that in chapter 1, and he kind of goes on to just repeat that throughout the book in different chapters. There are some other points he makes, but that seems to be, by the time you get to the end, of the one big point that he's trying to make, and he makes it right at the beginning of the book. So definitely in the last half, it was a bit of a, well, not as fun because he was just repeating himself basically. But it was good. There's some interesting stuff in there. And then another book that I finished, which was a lot more fun for me, was Ted Hughes' Hawk in the Rain. This is his first poetry collection, and it was the first poetry book as part of the Poetry Book Club that me and David Wiley are doing. So if you haven't heard of that yet, if you want to, you feel free to tag along if you want, read along. We'd love that. That'd be really cool. And I'll maybe in the description put down some of the books we're planning to do in the future and a schedule for what we're reading this month. But this was really good. Ted Hughes is one of my favourite poets, if not my favourite poet, but I've never read this collection, and so to go back to his beginnings as a poet, and even though there are some familiar poems, there's quite a lot of poems I hadn't read before, so it was lots of fun. Another one that was quite fun, but definitely had its dry periods too, so it was kind of a very mixed read, was Ezra Pound's Selected Poems and Translations. For me it was most fun when it was really confusing and I had no idea what was going on, and I'd be bouncing between the poem and the notes in the back, because then I know the poems were painting much more vivid pictures once I got some of the references, but still there were some areas where I just had absolutely no idea what was going on, and my eye was kind of scanning over the page and not really getting much from the words, but definitely something to revisit, I think, and was definitely worth reading. And then another poetry book club pick, because we had a bit of time at the end of November. We read an essay by Percy Bysshe Shelley, A Defence of Poetry, and again that was really fascinating. I think that was one of the highlights of the month actually. So many quotable little lines in there. I loved Shelley's really idealism, that poetry can be actually a positive force for change in society, yeah, I don't know, I always feel a bit cynical when people are like that with anything, but it's nice to hear it sometimes, and it was a good way to cap off my reading for November. And then some of the stuff that I'm reading at the moment or didn't manage to finish in November, this is something I plan to probably dip in and out of over the next couple of months. It's A Reader's Guide to T.S. Eliot, and I'm only about 56 pages through. This has been really interesting, and it was actually quite interesting reading this at the same time as reading Ezra Pound's poetry, and some things that crossed over, which was quite fun. Yeah, there'll be probably more on this later down the line. I managed to finally start Mary Oliver's new and selected poems. I'm only about 20 odd pages through, and there've already been some really good poems in here. Again, I'll probably get back on that in another video down the line, but I'm glad I've picked it up, and it's probably going to be a highlight. And then I was saying in my last wrap up in MBR video that I wanted November to be no fiction November, and I ended up breaking that rule, because I started reading A Death in the Family by Carl Ove Knausgaard, and I've been putting this off since maybe June, July, yeah, it's actually been really good. I had a bit of a fear that it was going to start well and then maybe get quite boring, but I haven't actually found that. He's managed to hold my attention, and I'm nearly at the end now. I've maybe started it towards the end of last week, so I've been reading it for about a week now, and nearly finished, and it's been really fun. And then the other book I'm reading at the moment, again it's a pick for the Poetry Book Club, and that's Lyrical Ballads by Wordsworth and Coleridge. Only just started in the last couple of days, but it's been really good so far, yeah, so the schedule I was talking about earlier is for this. So I've made a main schedule that goes from the 1st of December all the way through to the 24th to Christmas Eve, and then it gives you a week to kind of catch up, and then for anyone who's keen, there's some sort of extra stuff from later editions of Lyrical Ballads, so I'll try to find a way to attach that underneath, if you're interested in giving it a go. But that's everything I've been reading. Either I've started reading recently or I read in November. Here are a few of the books that I'm hoping to get to this month. Mark at Book Time with Elvis kind of runs a little humorous book club, kind of a funny book for every month. And this month the club are reading The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, and I haven't read this in ages. If you want to kind of sum up my childhood obsessions, it would probably be Douglas Adams, J.R.R. Tolkien, Star Wars and the Beatles, yeah, so maybe I might be revisiting. I definitely got 3 out of 4 there because I'm going through a bit of a Beatles nostalgia sort of thing at the moment. So and I'm going to be reading some Tolkien soon as well. So all I got to do is rewatch all the Star Wars films. So yeah, as I said, some J.R.R. Tolkien. David Wiley and loads of others are reading this in December, so I thought I'd do that as well. I don't know if I'll manage to stay on track with some of the other stuff I'm hoping to read, but I definitely want to read this month. It seems like the perfect time of year to be reading it, and I think a few other people feel the same. So I'm really excited to get back into this, and I'll probably open it up as soon as I've finished the Canals Guard. And then I got a couple of things here that I want to add on, and these are ones that I'm not going to be too strict about, because well, one, because they're short story collections, so I can just dip in and out of them where I feel I can, and you know, I want to focus on those other things really. So one of these is Don't Look Now, short story collection by Daphne du Maurier. I think I've read this before. I definitely remember the first story in here. So I'm going to give this a read. Again, it feels like the kind of book I want to be reading in these dark winter months. And then this is a book that's escaped any of the recent book hauls somehow, but this is the collected fictions of Borges, and I've only ever read fiction-wise by him, his Ficciones, and if that's how you say it. So this contains his first 2 collections, so it's got his fictions and artifices, yeah, I was really impressed with this. I've read his selected poems, so this is all of his fiction. Over the coming months I'm hoping to dip in and out of this, and yeah, and I think this will be really fun. Really weird cover though. I thought it was some surrealist artist, and then it's actually is it Bosch, however you say it, Hieronymus Bosch. So yeah, that was interesting. But anyway, there we have it. I managed to get to the end, and yeah, hope at least some of that was interesting. Yeah, please let me know what you thought, or if there's anything you think I need to add on, any suggestions for reading, I'd love that. But otherwise, that's everything for now, and I'll see you again soon.